Welcome back, everyone. Today we're doing another NECRIT video. It's funny, we just actually watched the first complete story explained about the League of Legends universe. And that was about 5 years ago. And then what do you know, today NECRIT decides to drop another video for specifically for Arcane fans, which is kind of nuts.
But this too, guys, Arcane fans.
Right.
That's the whole reason why we started watching like League of Legends lore, like
Yeah,
cinematics and stuff, just
it's
because of
it's true.
Arcane.
Honestly, I feel like a lot of people recently have been reacting to some of his videos, so that he's probably like, all right, these people don't know anything about the League universe. Let's teach them, especially if they're Arcane fans, because they don't know shit right now.
Yeah, and we were just scrolling through the comments of this video, and pretty much a lot of people think like NECRIT is the lore supreme guide for LoL. So I think we're in good hands with him.
I think so too, man. You ready to get into it? Now that we're
Let's
gonna
do
get
it.
some real knowledge. Maybe it's gonna
Let's
be
do
easy
it,
to
baby.
follow.
Have you finished watching Arcane? You got interested in the universe and you realized, I have no idea where to learn more about it? Well,
Yes.
you are part of the 90% of Arcane enjoyers who got into the same situation. It doesn't even matter if you play a League or not. The fact is, about 95% of all League players still have no idea what the lore is about. And that's because it
What
requires
the
a very
fuck?
niche skill to be utilized.
Oh,
Reading. Besides this,
Reading.
the truth is, without knowing what
Wow.
the universe is about,
Roasted.
there's gonna be a lot of
Okay.
people who will miss out
Yeah,
on
I'm assuming
really cool moments
playing
should
doesn't
Riot
really go
announce some
very
new
deep into the
projects.
lore.
Because if they
No.
say, hey, the new show...
Hey, we know those 3 zones. That was created by the Celestials, and the other 2
is
are
gonna be
the
in
rifts that
Ionia,
were
and it will
created
focus
by
on X, Y, and
the
Z.
Wardens, I
Well, the
believe, or the
people who know the
Watchers.
stories
The
will
Watchers.
freak out, but the rest will just say,
Is that Demacia?
we're
That's
just happy there is
Demacia, and they
something happening
don't
after
use
Arcane.
magic.
So why don't we fix that in today's video?
Noxus.
Noxus,
And in case
okay.
you are
Noxus, that's
just
right.
a
These guys are the
casual
Conquerors,
Arcane
right?
enjoyer, why don't we dive into what this universe can offer?
don't
Which
remember
also
that one.
includes some very specific storylines that might pop up in some future shows.
Oh, that
So
was
I think
the
when we were watching the Legends of Runeterra, which is like do you remember like the not like a character, they were like a more like a territory cinematic, right?
yeah.
And I think it was Noxus, the one that we saw like guys going and killing a king.
Yeah,
Is
they were
that the
taking
one?
over. Noxus was trying to take over, yeah.
Yeah. And I think one of the commenters said that like Noxus, they're like kind of good if you're depending on which side you are.
Yeah.
They're like conquering like a bunch of places. I think that's what I remember.
So, for the most part, if you want to learn about League's lore, there is one place that still has most of the lore.
The website.
And that would be the League of Legends Universe
Oh.
website. Besides 99%
Oh, there's
of
a
all
whole
lore
ass
being
like
written here,
universe
which also
website.
includes
Okay.
the newly updated bios, which are now in line with Arcane. It also has the
Oh.
interactive map, which is probably the most fun way to explore the
Wait,
universe.
they have an
But speaking of
interactive
Arcane
map?
and updated stories, this is
I thought
also
that was
where
part of the
incredible.
game.
that should Riot pump out new stories through shows or movies that are based on this universe. Just keep in mind that some
Yes,
specific
please.
stories might get changed, because even Arcane rewrote a lot of canon lore that was previously set in stone. However, it seems like going forward,
And now
Riot might
Arcane
be
is
dealing with
canon?
stories that are going into the future, because it's possible that they learned the lesson that retconning pressure stories is not the best move, and so
No.
I do believe that retconning will be a bit less common now. But still, because
Okay.
retcons can absolutely be a thing, today we are not gonna be exploring specific stories of specific champions in too much detail. But instead, we're gonna be diving into the overall world and the regions with their specific stories that make the regions unique.
Okay,
I
I
mean, the
like
point of
that.
this video
I wonder
is
how much
after you
different
watch
this
watch
is
it, you
going to
should
be
be
from
able
his
to
other
say,
video.
yeah, I have a vague
I was wondering
idea
the
of
same
what
thing
the lore
because
is
we kind of
about.
did
And
the
so behold,
same, like
the
we were
world
going
of
over the
League of
regions.
Legends called Runeterra. At first glance, you might think it's not that big, but then you may notice that yes, we can actually zoom in. And immediately you'll start noticing some places you might recognize from Arcane. First of all,
Bro,
yes, built over
someone
at
said there's gonna be
Zoltar,
an
right there in
MMO
the
of
middle
this.
the map,
I'm all over
and
it.
north of it, you might
This
arrive
would be
Let's do it.
beautiful.
Mortal Bastion. What is that, you might ask? Well, that is the capital city of Noxus, the nation
Bastion.
Ambessa is from.
Hey,
yes, a
we
very
know
important thing to point out
Ambessa.
is that in this universe,
I love
everything is
Mbessa, one of
linked.
my favorite
The
characters.
lore is simply massive and complex. So as we go through these regions, I'll try to connect the references to Arcane so you know roughly what we're talking about. So for now, let's zoom out
Thank
for
you.
a second and let's have a look
He
at the
says
world.
thank you.
Here you may notice that the world shown here is split into 3 big continents. There is Valoran, which is the entire northern part. There is Shurima, which is the entire southern part. And
Okay.
yes, Shurima is both the name for the continent and the empire that was on the continent. And there is also Ionia, an entire separate continent too. But somewhere in the east, there is also Kamavor, which is not shown on this map. But we know it exists because it was shown in the Ruination book. Now on these continents, of course, there are a
Hopefully they
lot
don't
of different
retcon that.
nations and regions and a lot of different stories. But again, for the purpose of this video, just to show you what this universe is about, let's focus on the biggest stories that shape these regions. And
Okay.
since we already mentioned
Okay.
Ambessa being from Noxus,
Yes,
let's
yes.
dive
Going
there.
to. I want
From
to hear that
Arcane, you
story.
might have gotten the idea that Noxians are strong and evil, which
In
technically
Warriors.
is true.
Technically,
to a
they
degree.
are.
You see, the Noxian Empire originally started as a tribe. Many years ago, before Valoran even got its name, and it was still simply called the Northern Wildlands, there was this one guy who was called Sun Uzal, who became
God
a warlord
damn.
of this tribe.
Damn!
Now, this warlord believed that should he die, he would be taken into the Halls of Bones, which was believed to be a sort of an afterlife, where the souls of the greatest
Look at this.
warriors would
This
feast
is.
for all
Can you pause it? Can you
eternity with
pause
the
it?
god.
This is if. What's the Reinhardt from Overwatch had a
Reinhardt.
kid with Sauron?
Oh my gosh.
Here it is.
Here it is.
Look
It's
at the helmet.
beautiful.
Look at the maze.
My boy is
Isn't it?
massive.
It
It's
simply
massive,
said,
dude.
the more you killed and conquered, the more glorious you would be in the eyes of the gods.
Ah,
and so his
okay.
entire life,
That's
Sun
not great.
Uzal did but one thing.
He killed.
Kill and conquer for the glory
God
of the
damn.
gods. Now eventually,
Yes.
Sun Uzal died, but instead of being taken into the Halls of Bones, he was taken into a grey wasteland, where he found nothing but a few mindless ghosts. This is when he realized there were no Halls of Bones and there were no gods of the afterlife, which is something he refused to accept.
It's not
He
great.
refused to believe that he did all the conquering for nothing. And so, being quite literally too angry to die, Sun Uzal refused to fade away. Yes, this is directly part of his story. And so, Sun Uzal stayed in this empty wasteland, and he just decided to become
Holy
God of
shit.
Death. So he
God
learned the
of
language
Death.
of the dead. He
They
whispered
killed a
into the world
fuckload of people,
Imagine
conquered
and
the
he found
world.
Waking up one
cultists
day and
who
it's like,
actually
yeah, I'm gonna be
managed
the
to
god of
resurrect
death.
him. And from that point on, Sun Uzal, in the language of the dead, was now known as Mordekaiser.
Mordekaiser.
So Mordekaiser's
Okay.
second reign began.
You can play him in
though
League, I
now
think.
he was an undead warlord. So now he built the Immortal
shit.
Bastion, which became the capital city of the Noxian Empire, and slowly his conquest of the world became.
Wait, did they say he was resurrected? Wonder who ended up resurrecting him? Seems
so
interesting.
I don't know.
unstoppable
I don't
that
think
the
he ever said
entire
that.
rest of
I
the
think he just
continent had to band
refused to
together
die, like
take
to
him
fade
down.
away.
And eventually they were successful with the help of a betrayal that happened from within Mordekaiser's closest ring. Of course, now we know that this betrayal happened from LeBlanc, who was Mordekaiser's advisor.
Oh,
And so
shit.
technically it was
We've heard of
Black
LeBlanc, I
Rose
think.
who bound
Yeah.
Mordekaiser's
Yeah,
soul
He's part of the
in
Black
his
Rose.
armor, and now he was
I think someone
banished back
mentioned
to
it in a
his realm
comment.
underneath Noxus. However,
I-
while he
Isn't
was
she
conquering
pause it? Yeah, I think the guy in the comments said that LeBlanc is like she's been living for like thousands of years and she's pretty much like the one manipulating everything.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't remember. I
Isn't
know
she?
she's pretty cool looking though. That's for sure.
Well,
every
all right,
soul
let's go.
I don't
Mordekaiser
remember who she
killed
is.
was now back down there
Mordekaiser,
in
these
his
subtitles.
Grey realm. That's what Mordekaiser decided to call his own afterlife.
Mortar.
And so now, in the Grey Realm with him, he had a whole new undead army. Now, most people don't know about this, but the Black Rose does. And so now, every time the Black Rose does something evil, it is most likely because they are trying to acquire power to stop Mordekaiser from coming back. Now, without Mordekaiser now ruling over the continent, a new empire rose around the Immortal Bastion. And of course, that empire became the Noxus we know now. So yes,
Yo,
the
Noxus
Noxians
controls
do
a
have quite a bit of
shitload of land.
DNA in their blood. However, the reason why Noxians are all about war is totally different. Because you see, during his conquest, Mordekaiser turned the surrounding lands into a complete wasteland. And of course, the other cataclysmic events that also happened didn't help. So Noxus doesn't really have a lot of natural resources. Growing crops is really difficult, and it's hard to find any kind of green land anywhere.
Makes sense.
So what the Noxians do to survive is simply conquering the surrounding nations for resources.
Oh,
that is why
okay.
Noxians are so aggressive.
So that's why they're only the bad guys.
I guess that
In
makes
fact,
sense.
a
Unless
really
you're
famous
part of
Noxian
them.
motto is kill them until they are family.
Kill
So
them until
now,
they are
if you
family.
go to the map of
So they're
Runeterra,
trying to
this
conquer
is
basically
why
the entire
Noxian
world, I'm
territory
guessing.
is so widespread.
Yeah, look how
it is
big that
because
is.
they conquered a piece of the Freljord.
It's a
They
shit ton
claimed
of
bits of
map.
Shuriman territory. And yes, they even ripped out a piece of Ionia.
Yeah, how'd
What's
they get
also
over there?
cool is
They
that
must got
even in
boats.
Arcane, Ambassa mentioned that she fought battles from the Blood Cliffs to the Dalamor Plains, with
Oh,
Blood
shit.
Cliffs being found here in the east and the Dalamor
Ooh.
Plains in northwest. Now, as I mentioned, Noxians
Bro,
also
this
claimed a
map
piece
is
of
so
Ionia.
sick.
And it just
Yeah,
so happens to
this is
be
impressive.
that this is a crucial point in Noxian history, while at the same time being something that ties us into the next region we can talk about. Ionia. So, if you've seen anything remotely Asian in Arcane, it is likely
It's
based
Ionia.
on Ionia. This even includes the portraits in House
I was gonna
Shurima.
say,
The
I was gonna
ancestor
say,
huntress
Caitlyn
is
looked
likely
kinda
in
Asian.
Ionia there. Anyway, we are still not sure if the storyline we are gonna talk about
Wait, was that
happened
Caitlyn?
before. Anyway, Skiraman.
I think that was a
Likely
family.
based on
Because that was the
Ionia.
mom, I
This
think.
even includes the portraits in House Kiraman. The ancestor huntress
You see?
is likely
The portraits
in
of House
Ionia.
Kiraman.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
Caitlyn
Anyway,
Kiraman.
we are still not sure if the storyline we are gonna talk about happened before Arcane or if it is gonna happen after Arcane is over. But a really important thing for both the history of Noxus and Ionia is the Noxian invasion of Ionia. Essentially,
Shit,
in
all
the
those
modern
ships they
days,
sent over.
Noxus was ruled by Borem Darkwill. I know, the
Borem
name is
Darkwill.
foreshadowing that was not a great dude. Anyway, Borem Darkwill was a grand
He was
general
not
who got
good.
manipulated into being a madman by LeBlanc. LeBlanc told him that
I'm telling you,
somewhere
man,
in Ionia,
I think
there
this is the
could
one
be an
that
object
manipulates
that
everything.
could make him immortal, which is something Darkwill liked very much. And so, that's why Noxus invaded Ionia. At least in Darkwill's eyes, they were doing this for his own immortality. In reality, LeBlanc just wanted to gain more power from those artifacts there. However,
Of
because
course.
we are talking about a madman invading a whole nation, of course
Who the
there
hell
were
is that?
no rules in this war.
Oh, no, but he
And
looks
so the
dope.
Noxians used massive chemical bombs.
Oh, hey, this is
They
the same
used
comic strip
children
that
as
was
warriors in the front
ripped out of the
Used in the
first.
previous.
with the
Yeah.
sole purpose of hoping that Ionians wouldn't fight back children. And they used many spies and propaganda to tell Ionians that Noxus are actually the good guys. And for a while, this worked, and the Noxian War was brutal. But Ionians had a few secret weapons of their own. First of all, Ionia is a land of peace and unity with the spirit of nature.
Oh yeah, we
are
saw
talking
that
about a place
in that
where
one
people don't
short,
even build their own houses.
the
They just
Runeterra
ask the
cinematic.
trees to shape themselves into a house. So what happened when chemical nukes were dropped here? Well, you
That
angered
probably
the
was not
spirits.
great.
And now the land itself was killing mortals left
Oh,
and
that's
right.
just like
It
the
didn't
tree
even
that we
matter
saw,
if you were
right?
Noxian
Yeah,
or
it looks like
Ionian.
it.
The
He looks
spirits
like
were
he's like a
angry,
protector
and every
spirit.
mortal was an enemy.
Yep.
And so, of course, a lot of Ionians didn't like this. They didn't appreciate the rivers forming into monsters and drowning them, or the trees just
Yeah, I
strangling
wouldn't
them
either.
in their sleep. And so they decided, you know what? Maybe peace is not the right option. Maybe fighting is the correct way to protect the land. And so there was a bit of division in
think?
Ionia,
Yeah.
where half of the people were still about peace and harmony,
And
but
the other
others
half
were
were
just
about
done
fighting.
with waiting around. And they were
we've
ready
seen
to
her, I
fight.
think.
A few years later, this invasion finally stops the moment this rebellion, led by Irelia, ends it all by
Irelia.
cutting off the hand of one of the more powerful generals of Noxus, that being Swain. After which, the
Swain?
Noxians were defeated at the Placidium of
Cool last
Navori.
name.
You know
The
Swain?
Noxians then
I-
slowly retreat back to the shores.
I've definitely
and
seen
that's why
him.
these days the Noxians control some of these
That
territories.
Swain was
one
like
of
a
the champions.
vampire
Of course,
type guy.
Ionia itself is full of dark stories related to the invasion. For example, there is a young Noxian warrior known as Riven, who is given
Yeah.
a powerful blade. Then she
We've seen her. She
flees
was the
from
one in the
war.
Gladiator
She accidentally
arena.
kills a wind technique
Mm.
master. After which everyone believes that this was done by his pupil Yasuo, and from that point
Yasuo.
on,
We
there's
saw
an
him
awesome
as well.
story arc of Yasuo
He's the guy that got
fleeing
old.
all of
He
his
was
comrades
younger
who
than
believe
he was
he's
older
murdered.
in the.
We
The
saw him
invasion is
older.
also related to
Yep.
another mass murderer known as Jin, who was being
Jin?
tracked down by ninja detectives, including Zed and Shen. And overall,
Zed.
there was
Oh,
a
you
lot
saw
of different
Shen
as
stories
well.
with a lot of
If we
furry
see this
races,
as a show like
some of which
Arcane,
also appear in
I
Arcane.
know,
Dang.
right?
Yes, those animalistic people are known as Vastaya. They technically originate from
Vastaya.
the East, and they are now all over this universe. Speaking of which, on the other side of this continent, there is another region that is heavily tied to Noxus as well. And that, of course, is
Demacia.
Demacia. On one side, Demacians can be seen as the good guys of this universe. But nothing here is really one-sided. Demacia is known for
Ooh.
mostly having pale
territory's a lot
buildings,
smaller.
weapons, and armor. And of course,
Who
all
owns
of
the
that is
territory
rooted
between
in
them?
some
Is it
deep
just like a
lore.
wasteland?
Many years ago,
I
there
guess.
was an incident that was also called out in Arcane. That being the Rune Wars.
Yeah.
Essentially, once upon a time, there was
That
a
was
mischievous
what
Celestial
created
who decided
the
to spread
entire
powerful
world
runes
with these
around
rune
this world.
stones.
For a
Mhm.
very long time, these runes stayed hidden, but then an event known as the Darkin Wars happened.
Jesus
The world was
Christ!
turned
Is that
inside
Aatrox?
out,
One of
Yeah,
our commenters
now
said
the
Aatrox.
mortals started
He was
a
discovering these
Darkin.
runes. They realized they are very powerful and that they can be used as magical nukes. And now every
great.
city that held one of these runes essentially had
No.
access to nukes. And yes, this led into a magical
That's insane,
warfare
bro.
simply known as the Rune Wars. And well, around Demacia, we could find a really interesting forest. It was full of white trees that had a very
Ooh.
special ability. They could absorb magic. So while this magical war was happening,
Ooh.
the people who fled this war fled
Bro.
into this forest. And here they started a new
Looks like something out of Harry
anti-magic
Potter.
nation called Demacia. Here, by cutting down the trees and mixing them with a bit of ash and lime, the Demacians created petricite,
Gondor?
a material that could be
Petricite?
used for
This
anything,
Gondor?
be it buildings, weapons, or armor. And it would always give them the same magic absorbing ability. So
Look
now
at
you
those
can
helmets.
see that if
God
you are a
damn, look at
mage
this city.
in Demacia,
I'll be a
life kinda
I'll live in
sucks because
Demacia for
everything
sure.
around you is absorbing your life essence. And in fact, that's the main point of Demacia. Because this place was founded as a
Anti-magic.
heavily anti-magic place, there are a lot of places, especially in the smaller towns, where people like mages. They like that some of the mages can make crops grow, and others can just make lives easier. But especially around the capital city, the hatred towards mages is still going strong. So naturally, it didn't take long and there was a civil war, which was all
Bit
about
racist?
racism against people who could use magic. In fact, inside the capital, there was even a prison that had some really
Jesus
awful
Christ.
torturing methods that was supposed to cleanse you from magic. Yes, they would
Damn.
make mages drink a petricide
That's-
potion.
It's like
Well, I don't know if I want to
which
be a
usually
Demacian
killed them.
anymore.
Now, the center point of this story
There's
is
luck.
Laxana Crownguard, a member of a royal house and
Luck.
the sister to one of the highest placed commanders, who was
Did we see this
secretly
guy like
Yeah.
fighting
a
against the
mage.
dragon?
But she is not the only point of hypocrisy here. For example, Jarvan IV, who is now becoming the new king of Demacia,
Jarvan
also
IV?
fell in love with a half-dragon woman known as Shyvana, who
What?
technically is a magical being.
Ooh, that's
I was gonna
so
say.
That a
fucking
lot of
sick.
people hunt here. So yes, Demacia is all about anti-magic tools, while hunting witches and mages. But in the recent days, the hatred kinda slowed down as the rebellion was pushed back. In fact, you can find most
Good.
of this in the Mage Seeker game.
Oh,
But what's interesting is that the Demacia also has its roots in a totally different region. I told you everything is connected. You see, this entire place is tied to Mount Targon. So let's talk about
that was
that.
created by the
Yeah, we saw a
Celestials.
bunch
Mount
of them.
Targon is a very unique place. It
Yeah.
is a mountain that was literally ripped up by the celestial
With all like the
gods.
frozen
That's
lakes
why
on the
if you
side of
decide
it.
to climb the mountain, you will see stuff like lakes just frozen on the side of the mountain as it was being pulled up. In fact, climbing the mountain is a challenge a lot of mortals took upon themselves, because people notice that the peak of this mountain is directly linked to the celestial realms. Almost as if the peak was a portal. So should a mortal reach the peak of Mount Targon, and should they be deemed worthy, they would be given the chance to become a host to a celestial aspect. These
Bro,
aspect hosts are
what?
essentially demigods.
That's
They are
fucking
people who get
sick.
infused with the power of
Demigods?
celestial
Demigods?
aspects, and in fact, after becoming a host, to a lesser or greater degree, depending on what aspect we are talking about, these gods can entirely take over the hosts. For example, when the Rakoran warrior
Holy fuck.
Pantheon climbed
Oh,
the
Look at
mountain,
this.
Pantheon.
his
Look at
body
this
got
dude.
entirely
The spear
dominated by
and
the
shield.
celestial aspect known as war. Of course, we also know that
His name
there
is
the
just
aspect
War?
of the sun, the aspect of the moon, the
Oh.
aspect of the twilight,
Oh,
or
oh.
even the aspect of the protector. Now, tying
The Protector.
everything back together once again, there is also the aspect of justice, which was a woman who gave birth to twin daughters, which together with their father fled to a safe region which would be far away from any kind of celestial fire. And so, of course, they fled to Demacia, the anti-magic region. And there, these twin daughters later inherited their
Holy
mother's
shit,
power,
they look
and they
insane.
became the twin aspects of justice. This
The
was
twin
way at the
aspect-
beginning when
what?
Demacia was
I
still
could see
getting
a
the
show
hang of
about
their
this.
magical
Definitely.
racism. So having two magical
Oh
gods
yeah, I
among
could see a
them
show about
fighting each other
freaking everything.
didn't help. And yes, of course, I'm talking about Kale and Morgana, who were
Kale and
there during the
Morgana.
first foundations of Demacia. So, that's why Demacia is connected to the mountain. Not to mention that when criminals betray the country, Demacians can sentence them to bearing the crown of stone, which is a fancy name to sending them to Mount Targon and making them ascend the mountain, where most of them just flee, but some of them die.
Oh.
And that's the point. Demacians just
That's
get rid of the awful people by sending them to the mountain. Also, there is one more thing that
Have
happened
fun.
on this mountain, where the locals figured out how to forge celestial metals, and they crafted a
Oh, hey,
giant
that's,
crown for a celestial
Aurelian
god.
Soul.
Targon.
It was supposed to be a gift, which the god took, but then it turned out to be a trick. The crown
Yeah.
allowed the mortals to enslave the god. But that is a story for
Oh,
another
yeah, I
day.
remember that.
Instead,
Yeah,
interestingly
yeah.
enough, Mount
'Cause he was
Targon
used to
is
close all
also
the
important
Watcher's
for another
portals.
region,
Yeah.
Shurima. Shurima is the big desert with the massive floating sun disk in the middle, which
that's
used
what
to
they're-
be home to an empire that
They
had the
created,
power
was it
to conquer
Ascended
the
with
world.
that?
But as every empire
Yes.
in the history of ever,
Like
they
they
do
were the
crumbled
Egyptian
after a
gods.
betrayal from
They
within.
look like the
Anyway,
Egyptian
Yeah,
during
yeah,
gods.
we
their
had, like,
peak, the empire was
uh,
led by an emperor,
Nasus, who looked like
with
Anubis.
perhaps the most influential
Mhm.
emperor in history being Azir.
Yeah, I was
who
gonna say
helped
Azir.
Shurima being known for
He
one
was like the
big
king, right?
thing, conquering everything using a golden army of god warriors.
Jesus
Essentially,
Christ,
the big
that's
sun
cool as
disk in the
shit.
middle of the empire had a
Ooh,
purpose.
I got
You
chills.
remember Targonians crafting a big crown from celestial metals? Yes, that same technology was also used to build the sun disk. So now, the sun disk had the ability to reflect celestial magic
I still want to see
into
how
mortal beings.
they
And by doing this, they would be
just
transformed
reflected
or
this magic into
ascended
someone. Was it
into
literally just like
somewhat animalistic,
beamed
really
into him?
powerful warriors.
Yeah.
In the Empire, these were known
Oh, is that
as the
s-
Ascended,
oh, what is his
or
name?
the God Warriors. For a very long time,
The
these
crocodile
God
dude.
warriors,
Yeah.
the Shuriman Empire could go wild around
If
the
I see him, I'm running.
but
He
that
looks like
was until
Sobek
the
from
Emperor
Smite.
got backstabbed. The Golden Armies then lost their leadership and the Sun Disk crumbled. Now, slightly crazy and confused, the God Warriors were twisted into the power
This is the
hungry
Darkin.
Of course, if you remember
Mhm.
Demacia, you might remember I mentioned that the Darkin later have a war. That's how the runes got discovered, and
The
that's how
blood
Rune Wars
magic,
happened.
right?
Yep,
They
as
discovered
I
the blood
mentioned,
magic.
everything is connected. Anyway, very long time passed, and through a chain of coincidences, a descendant of Emperor Azir's bloodline entered his tomb and managed to resurrect him. With that, the sun disk rose as well, and now these days, the Empire is kinda resurrected. Or at least, the capital city is back up in shape. And what happens after that, we still don't know. Now, right next to this desert, there's also another interesting thing to point out.
The
There is a place
Void.
that is entirely
The
destroyed
Void, which was a
by the
mess.
Void. Very
It was a
long
Yeah, there was
hot
that big
mess.
fight
The
there.
Void
That's
is
where
essentially the opposite of reality.
all the
Instead of
Watchers started coming
something,
through.
It is nothing. It is a dark realm that is being occupied by entities known as the Watchers. These are just beings that really hate reality because reality is like a light that keeps waking them up from deep slumber. So all they want to do is just
Wait,
turn off
all
that
they want to
light,
do is
which
sleep.
unfortunately means
We
they
remember
wanna
like
destroy the
from that
world.
last video.
And
That's what they
well,
were doing.
it
They were just
turns
like
out that
floating. They
while
didn't even
the
know they
Freljord Empire
existed
was
until the
conquering
light.
world, they also
That's how
wanted
the
to
video
conquer
started
a
with them.
nearby
Yeah, it
kingdom known
did.
as Icathia.
Oh yeah,
The
we were
moment
sleeping,
the
and
God
then there was a
warrior armies
light.
marched upon them, the Icathians knew they were screwed, and so they decided to use magic. But not just any kind of magic. They wanted to summon the glorious power of the Void. Now, of course, they didn't know
Genius.
that by doing this, the Void would just annihilate everything. And so when they did that, they technically won the war, but they also annihilated an entire piece of this planet. And this is why Icathia is just a
Jesus
piece of
Christ.
void annihilated wasteland.
So that, yeah, let's say
Now,
all that
after
around
the
it is
void
just
consumed
wasteland.
a big piece of land, the place right
Jesus.
next to it started being worried.
Ixtal.
Of course, I'm talking about
I don't think
the
we know
region
about
known
these.
as Ixtal.
So,
Ixtal is just
That looks
Territory
like
yet.
a
elemental
like
mages.
Mexican
Air,
place.
water, earth, fire, they
Oh,
got
they
it
kind of
all.
look like
And in self
Do they look
they got
Mexican?
worried
Mexican
that the void would slowly
native
consume
people.
the entire world. And so Ixtal decided to raise massive walls of plants around the entire region.
By the
to
way, I'm
isolate
Mexican. I'm allowed to
themselves
say
from
that.
the rest of the world. In fact, they got so isolated, many people believed that the outside world was just destroyed and that there was nothing. Specifically, they believed that the moment they walked beyond the wall of plants, they would just suffocate because there was no air. But a long time after that, they realized the outside world was fine.
We
And these
we
days,
got
the
there all we want.
leadership of Ixtal is trying to figure out
Ixtal. I said
how do they
Ixtal.
let people know? That's where
course it wouldn't
Kiana's
be
story
that.
kicks in, where she just ventures outside of the walls, and she's noticing that Piltovans keep coming down to south, and they're just destroying their land for resources. Yep, that's why we saw the Ixtali logo in Arcane, even though Ixtal is supposed to be isolated and hidden. People are still aware of the jungles around, at the very least. In fact, outside of Ixtal, those surrounding jungles are mostly unexplored. And that's
Wow.
because, simply said, they are very dangerous. The Noxian
That sounds like
tried to
Michoacan,
conquer
an
these
actual
jungles,
city.
but failed. And that could be partially because this is also where we can find Zyra, a really creepy plant that keeps killing anything that lives.
Zyra?
And yes, also somewhere below these jungles there is also a void rift.
that Groot?
So you know what? Maybe the Ishtali isolation was
Groot.
justified. But that kind of
Looks
ends
like
all
it.
the
Wait, so
ties
there's a
to the
void rift
southern
under there
continent.
too?
So now we
Yeah.
have to jump
That's
all the way
interesting.
back to the north.
Where are we going
where
next?
we can
Freljord?
find the Freljord.
The
Freljord
Freljord.
is simple.
Freljord.
It is a frozen
How
wasteland where
do you say
everyone
it?
is fighting
Freljord?
for survival.
Freljord?
It is a brutal land where
I
very
think he said
often you will
Freljord.
find people worshipping the
Freljord?
demigods,
Probably that.
such as Ornn, Volibear,
Oh, look.
Anivia, the Iron Boar, stuff like that.
The
With
Iron
these
Boar?
demigods essentially gaining
Bro.
power the more people worship
Volibear
them.
is
Now outside
kinda
of
wild
this
looking.
entire region is shaped by
Oh,
a
but this is the
single
place
story.
where one of the
Very
sisters
long
had
time
a
ago, this entire
pretty
place
much
was ruled by three
how do you
sisters.
call it?
Avarosa,
She froze.
Shurima,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
Yeah,
Lysandra.
she froze
As
the
these
land.
three were building their
Yeah, yeah.
armies, Lysandra got in touch
Yeah,
with
it was
the Watchers.
Lysandra who
Yes,
froze
Lysandra.
everything.
the beings that are inside the void.
Yeah,
Through their whispers, the Watchers kind of made Lysandra
This
believe
explanation is
that they
incredible.
would make them all immortal if they just let them into their
You
world.
can tell that he actually
Which, to
read
be fair, yes,
a
the
bunch.
Watchers did
Yeah.
that, and that's why in Freljord there is now a race known as the Iceborn. The Iceborn are technically
Ash is
void-touched
Iceborn?
people.
I
But
did
that
not
is
know
heavily
that.
oversimplifying it. Regardless, Lysandra believed the Watchers, and she actually managed to prepare the Freljord for their arrival. And so, after a while, the Watchers actually arrived, and they looked Not how Lysandra imagined them.
He's
Yes,
like,
she immediately
"Wait a minute, I
realized
fucked
that
up."
these
You're
beings
like,
are
"Uh-oh."
not here to help
Froze all the
anyone.
What did I
land.
do?
So Lysandra had to do the ultimate sacrifice. She had to melt all the iceborn to freeze the Watchers. Yes, she sacrificed everyone who was in their nation to stop the end of the world. And in fact, that is what she's doing these
Which
days.
I
Probably-
guess
To
is a
this
small
day,
sacrifice
the Watchers are
I-
still
yeah.
frozen beneath
in the big scheme of
Freljord.
things.
So that
And
if
she
that
is
ever
constantly trying
thaws,
to
they're
figure
kind of
out
fucked.
how to keep them frozen.
Yeah.
She is even walking around Freljord to find the iceborn so she can freeze them and make them fall asleep, so
Huh.
she can then feed their dreams to the Watchers so that the Watchers stay asleep. Honestly, the lore of the Freljord is nuts. But for
Yeah,
the purpose
I
of
want
just knowing
to
what's
go
happening
into
here,
that more.
yeah,
Yes.
it's barbarians in a frozen wasteland. Which
That's
then
all it
takes
is.
us to three
Barbarians in a
more regions, which
Three
are
more?
quickly
Viking-looking
First
guys.
of all, below Ionia, you will also find Bilgewater. This is your pirate place,
Ooh,
The
where
pirates.
pirate
Yeah,
stories
yeah.
happen. Mostly we are talking about
Misfortune
the pirate
was
king
here.
Gangplank, who was taken down by
Gangplank.
Captain Fortune. And now you have a bunch of pirate gangs who are fighting for leadership over Bilgewater. Of course,
Yo.
besides that, you also
Holy
have a bunch
shit.
of stories with
Oh,
sea
this
is
so
monsters.
dope.
There are also the Buru, who believe
like
in
Booty
the
Bay
god
from World of Warcraft.
Nagaboros, a god of motion who makes sure that everyone stays in motion.
god.
So if you're not doing anything with your life, the god believes you should just die and you're wasting energy. Now, of course, Bilgewater is
Shit,
Asshole.
constantly
you better start
fighting
moving.
the undead who keep arriving here from the Shadow Isles.
Oh,
Now,
the Shadow Isles.
actually
Is
have
that
a lot
where
of lore behind them. They used to be the Blessed
When we
Isles,
saw
and there
the
used to be
guy,
quite
the
a
like
lot of
kid
very
Thresh
powerful
losing the spirit
mages who
to
came from
yeah.
this place. But very long story short, in fact, a story that is the longest out of anything that happened in this universe. There was a king who came here from another region
that?
who really desperately wanted to resurrect his rotting queen. And everything failed, the Blessed
oh.
Isles blew up, they were turned into Shadow Isles, and now
Holy
everything
shit.
here is undead. It's
He
not
was just
random
trying to
undead, though.
resurrect his
Again, there is deep
queen,
reason
and it
why
turned
everyone is
into.
undead. There is
Oh,
fucking-
oh, this is the
magic
guy that we
here, but
saw.
you know
Yeah,
what?
yeah.
All of
So
that
that's
is
what was
tied
happening in
to
that
the last
cinematic.
region, Gamavor,
Oh, that's
which
so
you can't find on this
cool.
map. Yes, Gamavor is an entire continent that was explored in the Ruination book. We still can't find it on the interactive map, but we know it is real. This is where Viego comes from. That's the king who
Viego?
tried to resurrect his
Viego.
queen, who is wielding a powerful blade that is all about consuming souls and kinda turning people undead under the very
Kind
wrong
of.
circumstances. And in fact, Gamavor is just a region full of dragons, mythical beings, and holy lands with paladins and stuff like that. But that sounds like a DLC for the MMO or something like that. And in a nutshell,
I was gonna
that's
say
really
Paladin.
Something like that.
what this universe is about. A lot of
That's
conflicts,
it. Well,
a lot
damn.
of wars, couple of invasions.
Just that's about it. And
Is
he's
that-
just
that's
going,
it?
I
Yeah,
think,
just bloodshed everywhere. And
like
yeah,
just
we
like
didn't
an
even talk about
overview
Blood
of
Over Red Zone,
like a
because
brief
that
explanation
world
of
was
the
covered
whole
in
lore.
Arcane, and guess what
Yeah,
happened
this is just
there?
a very basic.
An invasion
understanding.
brief
and bloodshed.
explanation.
And who was invading? Of course, Noxus once again. In fact, Noxus now has a whole new story
all they
that's
do.
happening in League of Legends, and so going forward,
Oh,
yeah, whatever happens
Find
after
some more
Arcane
about
will
that.
likely be related to Noxus. But now you can say, hey, I have a very vague idea of what this universe is about. So now we can all agree
This
that if
asshole,
Riot touches anything
I have a
about
very
Mordekaiser,
vague
everyone is gonna
idea.
freak out.
that's for fucking sure.
I mean, yeah, 30-minute video. I guess you cannot go over everything.
No. And
No.
someone recommended us to watch the MMO videos as well. And
Alice also suggested something. Did you see that?
yeah, I think it wasn't that the MMO videos as well. I don't remember what those were.
I'm not sure. I know she recommended something.
Yeah.
I recommend NECRIT video on censored censored Legends of Runeterra cards. Very enjoyable.
Oh, that could be good then. We'll definitely check
That
that
could
one
be
out
good.
too. Yeah.
Yep.
But I like that. It went into a little more
was a ton.
detail. Yeah, it was a lot. I think the first video that we watched, just like the complete story explained, was more. It was more about how this world was started and created, and then this video we're actually going and diving into
Well,
the
if you
different
think about it,
factions.
if you think about it, on the first video, he says how the Watchers were asleep on nothingness, right?
Yeah.
And then a light came up, and then they were kind of like, "What the fuck is going on?" And
Yeah.
then they went, and Runeterra was there. So technically, if I'm mistaken, the world was already there.
It was,
know?
but none of these like factions were created yet. Like these weren't
Well,
around
yeah, I mean,
yet. It was that was
eventually,
so much later,
but
but
yeah.
um,
But man, this NECRIT dude, god damn.
he knows what he's doing. Please go check out his stuff. I mean, we've been loving his videos so far. We definitely want to dive into more of these. We'll probably check out some more League cinematics too at some point, but I want to watch the MMO video because MMOs just excite me. I love World of Warcraft. I love RuneScape if you ever played that. So like, I love MMOs. So like, whenever this comes out, I'll be playing this. And it looks like they already have like they already have the map created, so it's not like they're gonna have to redesign a whole ass new map. They have the zones, they have the characters. I think the only thing they'd have to create like classes and stuff, but I don't even know how they're gonna do that. Like, can I just play as Yasuo, or are we gonna have to go through and create our own character? I don't know, man.
It'll be cool to create your own.
Yeah.
That way you can like feel like you're fully immersed in the world, and then you interact with the actual champions.
Oh, bro, could you imagine just you're in fucking Piltover and you're chilling with Heimerdinger?
Imagine using a VR headset playing an MMO of this. Like looking like, God,
dude, if VR headsets were to the point of like Ready Player One, I think it would be incredible. VR headsets the way they are right now, nah.
It's not.
It's not it. It's not it.
Not yet.
That the technology just isn't there yet to like really feel super realistic. It's fun, but I feel like it's just a novelty that wears off really quick. Yeah. Plus those fucking things hurt after a while on your head.
They do. They for sure do.
Yeah. But if we got like a fucking Ready Player One situation with this, I'm all in. Let's go. I'm in there. They're like,
people had to quit or something.
My wife would probably hate me.
You had to quit YouTube. You had to quit your actual job just to.
Yeah, but if there's money to be made in the game, I'm in there too.
I know. I was gonna say, you do content creation of that in a specific.
That's it. They'll show me all day. I'll be playing VR all day. VR MMO, chilling with Heimer. That's what we'll call it. All right. Thank you everyone for watching this video with us. If you enjoyed a reaction, please remember to leave a like and subscribe.
See you in the next one.
Bye everyone.
Bye.